Hello CS112. Today I'll be going over a quick solution to Lab 7, which has to do with user-defined functions. For this lab, you needed to create 3 functions, a main function here that would have 2 helper functions. And in this main function, you were given a variable amount of numbers, and you had to determine whether it was a valid frequency or not. How do you determine if it's a valid frequency? Well, let's just take a look at the first test case here. What you needed to do is add up all of the arguments except the last one, and then if the sum of those numbers ones place is equal to the last digit, then it is correct, else you would return error. And these are just strings, by the way. So in this case here, you have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, that's 15, and in the ones place you have a 5, and 5 equals 5, thus this is correct. If you want to mentally do these other ones, you can, but that's the general gist of this. So for these functions, you would have def check correctness, and what this would do is you'd be given a variable amount of arguments. That's what this star denotes here, which means you can have, let's say, you can have 6 arguments or 8 or 100 if you wanted. This just allows you to have as many arguments as you want. And what you needed to do is call SUMList, which is a helper function, which just essentially sums up a given list, and then rightmost digit, which is actually ones digit, a little typo there. That would just, given a number, you would return the 1 digit. So in this case, if it was given 15, it would return 5. If it was given 1057, it would return 7, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to dive right into it, and I'm going to start with a code skeleton. So what is the first thing I want to do? Well, I do know that I need to call these 2 things, and obviously I'm going to need to call this first, because once I get the sum of the list, that sum is what I will be passing into ones digit. So first, I want to format numbers. Now, we can totally format numbers and treat it kind of like a list if we want to. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this full screen just so it's easier to see. But if I just wanted to iterate through all of the arguments I have, I can do that directly by saying for I in numbers, and then just printing out I. What that's going to do with any of these function calls is it will print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5. You can test that out on your own. I'm not actually going to execute it, but we weren't given many restrictions for this. So for those of you who remembered a lot of those functions in Zybooks, this part would have been really easy for you. So all I really need to do in order to format this so I don't have that last 5 in my sum when I call SUMList, well, I can use the lists function and then just slice it. So if I was to say LST equals, and then I say list numbers, what list does is it will take any sequence and then format it into a list, which is what I need, and then I can just immediately and directly slice it by saying :-1. So when I'm slicing it here, if you have no argument before the colon, that means you want to include just starting from the beginning, and I want to go all the way up -1. So what this is going to do, it's going to start from the beginning and go all the way up -1. So my list is going to just equal 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And just to verify that, because we're pragmatic programmers, we want to test as we go, I'm just going to print it out real quick just to verify. So as you can see, as I start stepping through, it's going to have the first function call. It's going to go back up to my main function here. It's going to set LST equal to numbers -1, which are the arguments -1. If I just printed that out, as you can see, I'm not including that last 5 in my sum. So now I know if I go back to edit this code, I can just immediately call SUMList with that. So before I do that, I actually kind of want to just finish up writing a code skeleton so I can know what I'm doing before I just blindly start coding. So I'm just going to say here, find sum of list. Once I find the sum of list, I want to find the ones digits of sum. And lastly, determine if valid sequence. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward 3-step problem. I think the main issue people had was knowing how to call these outside functions. So I'm just going to dive right into it. So the first thing you want to do is find the sum of the list. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to create a variable called SUMList. Sorry, my cat wants to get out. Okay, so where were we? I'm going to create a variable called SUMList, and I'm going to set it equal to SUMList, which is the function name here, and I'm going to call it with LST. LST is the list we just created, so in this case it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what this will do is by creating a variable and setting it equal to a function call with a parameter, it will set whatever this function call with this parameter return value is. So in this case, once we actually code this function, if we were to pass to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, like sum list 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, then it would be equal to 15. So since we are calling this function now, I'm going to go ahead and code this. So this was a pretty both these helper functions were pretty straightforward. You just had to, find the sum of the list and then get the ones digit. So for here, I'm just going to say results equals 0. I'm going to say for I in LST, and I'm just going to say results plus equals I, and I'm just going to return result at the end there. And that's a pretty straightforward function right there, so I don't think many of you guys had many issues with that. So now when LST is called here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, it will iterate 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 while adding its result, returning 15 at the end. So sum list is now 15. So now we want to find the ones digit, set that equal to ones digit sum list. So now, once this is equal to 15, finding the entire sum of the list, that 15 will be passed through here, getting the ones digit, so this should equal 5, right? So how can we do that? Well, all we need to do is modulate it by 10, because if we modulate anything by 10, that's just going to have a remainder of the ones place. So I can just simply return number modulus 10, and that will get us that ones place. So now that we have that, we need to determine if it is equal to the last digit of numbers. So I'm just going to directly index numbers because we can see numbers kind of like a list before, as I showed you using a for loop to iterate through it, so on and so forth. It's not exactly a list though, it's a sequence of numbers, but regardless, I'm going to check if ones digit, which is the ones digit that we just found up here, is equal to numbers -1. So I'm just grabbing that last argument here. So the one that we didn't include in our sum, so this 5, this 7, this 0, so on and so forth. My cat is walking on me right now. Give me 1 second. So if it is equal to that, that is when we're going to return the string correct. Else we are going to actually need to type return. That would help. Type error. Sorry, I cannot see my thing. My cat's just, okay. Return correct or return error, and I'm going to get rid of this return statement because we do not need that. So now let's go ahead and visualize this. So I'm going to hit visualize execution, and I'm going to step through it real quick. I'll just step through the first one so we can see what's happening. So obviously the Python interpreter will start at the top of our file. It's going to skip over all the comments and go straight to our first line of code. I apologize if you can hear my cats. It's just going to read this function name, and it's not going to enter the function because it hasn't actually been called yet. It's going to go straight to the next function name, straight to the next function name, and then boom. We're using check correctness, so it's going to have that function call. So now it's going to go back up to where remember check correctness is, and then enter the function. We're going to create LST, which is going to equal the given arguments minus that last element. As you can see here, LST is now pointing to an array of all the arguments minus the last one. And then we're going to, as you can see, a function call here, that last step right here, sumList equals sumList LST. A function call was added to the call stack here. And they're both pointing to the same list because we're passing through this LST here. And then we're just going to create this result. We're going to add up every single number. As you can see, result is being incremented and it should end at 15. As you can see, it ended at 15 there, and we are going to return that result. So the return value of this function call is 15, which is going to equal a variable called sumList. So when I hit next here, you see sumList, this variable is created and set to 15. Now 15 is going to be called into ones digit, and we're just going to return 15 modulus 10, which is 5. So as you can see here, the return value is 5, and now we're going to have a new variable, ones digit, which is equal to 5. And now we're going to determine if this is going to be equal to the last argument, which it should be, and we're returning correct. And I did print the return value, so it will be displayed to the screen as well. I'm just going to hit last so we can see all the outputs, and as you can see, we got the correct outputs as they desired. You can test these out on your own or step through them as you please, but I personally learned Python using Python Visualizer and stepping through it, understanding control flow, that stuff. So if you have any questions, let us know.